Carl Jung believed that true transformation doesn't begin with light or applause. It starts in the darkness, where everything old within you begins to crack. The upheavals you experience are not random. They are sacred signals that you're about to step into the deepest, most powerful, and truest phase of your existence. So how do you know you're on the verge of an entirely new era? In the next few minutes, I'll reveal 4 powerful signs that your soul is preparing to enter the most profound, radiant, and authentic stage of your life. You'll be surprised to discover that some of these signs are already unfolding within you. Stay until the end, because once you recognize these signs, you won't be able to go back. But trust me, you won't want to. Sign 1. The things that once excited you now feel tasteless. You wake up one morning, open your eyes, and realize that the things that once set your heart ablaze now feel like hollow shells. The job that was once your pride has become a series of mechanical actions. Familiar conversations suddenly feel shallow and flavorless, as if you're replaying an old tape you've memorized word for word. The passions that once ignited your heart no longer stir anything within. Nothing is specifically wrong, but nothing feels right anymore. Carl Jung called this phase the cracking of the ego. It's when the persona, the self you've used to define yourself, to build your image, to cling to for survival, begins to lose its hold. You haven't lost your ability to live. You're gradually shedding a shell that no longer fits your soul. Imagine a snake that has grown so much that its old skin can no longer contain its body. At first, it feels restless and itchy, but soon, that discomfort becomes unbearable. The skin that once served as protective armor turns into shackles, and so, driven by instinct, it begins to rub and stretch, letting pieces of the old skin fall away. This shedding is not an end. It's an irreversible beginning, and you too are like this. When the things that once excited you become tasteless, when old passions no longer awaken anything inside, don't assume you're collapsing. You may simply be outgrowing a version of yourself that's too small for your soul's evolution. You once craved progress, climbing the ladder of success with an unwavering belief in achievement. Each victory was a medal pinned to your chest, both a source of pride and proof of your worth to the world. But one day, those medals begin to feel heavy, not because they've lost their shine, but because they no longer say anything about who you are. They are memories, not the living truth. As Jung once said, one could say, with a little exaggeration, that the persona is that which in reality one is not, but which oneself, as well as others, think one is. This is the first and one of the most subtle yet persistent signs of inner transformation. It doesn't arrive like a loud explosion you can name or explain. It comes as a slow, almost silent shedding of everything that once defined your identity. The things that make you feel like someone begin to lose meaning. You start to realize that you no longer fit the old version of yourself. And in the gap between who you were and who you're becoming lies a nameless haze, a place where you don't yet know where you're headed, only that going back is no longer an option. From a psychoanalytic perspective, this is the moment when the ego and the self begin to clash. The ego wants to maintain the familiar, where you have a clear role, recognition, and approval. But the soul doesn't care about accolades or facades. The soul cares only about truth. Jung emphasized that the soul's awakening often begins with a sense of exhaustion, as the ego is worn down, and the true self has yet to fully emerge. Your ego might scream that you're lost, but in reality, you're becoming more honest than ever before. What makes this phase dangerous is that society often misunderstands it. Others may call you unmotivated, lazy, or lacking passion. But deep inside, you know this isn't a lack. It's an overflow of things that no longer align with you, so much so that you can no longer swallow them. This is the first step in Jung's process of individuation, the journey of breaking free from the external molds that have shaped you since childhood. You must be excellent, successful, liked, and have clear goals. You begin to ask, am I doing this because I truly want to, or because I've been conditioned to meet others' expectations? It's a frightening question, because once you ask it, you can't pretend you didn't hear it. Jung likened this process to the inner child waking up after years of slumber, a child who cares not for status or achievements, but for what makes it feel truly alive. When this happens, you stop settling for things that are merely fine. You stop enduring relationships that only fill time. You begin saying no to invitations that don't reflect your soul. This isn't selfishness, it's awakening. At this moment, when everything around you seems to lose its color, you may be standing exactly where transformation begins. Carl Jung once said, "If the path before you is clear, you're probably on someone else's. So you must always ask, what is the path I need to take?" That question cannot be answered without first asking, what is true? What is enough? What truly matters to me? When old values and habits crack, you begin to see clearly that you've spent too much time living by others' standards. You pursued stability because you were taught it was safe. You accumulated reputation, money, and degrees because you believed that was a success. But when you hold it all in your hands, you suddenly realize it doesn't make you feel alive. It's like exquisite porcelain in a display case, beautiful and valuable, but cold. It fills space, but doesn't make you bloom. You look back and see that you've lived to achieve something, but not to feel life. You've run toward a finish line without ever asking, do I want to reach that destination? You're like a sailor waking up in the middle of the sea after years of navigating by someone else's chart. You always thought you were on the right course. The map seemed clear, and everyone around you was sailing in the same direction. But one morning, you realize the compass in your heart has long veered off that path. The familiar stars no longer guide you. You drop anchor, stand still on the deck, and for the first time ask, where do I truly want to make landfall? That moment isn't loud or dramatic, just a quiet breeze, enough to make everything you once thought certain feel fragile. And you know, it's time to put away the old map and learn to listen to yourself to find a new direction. When you ask what truly matters, you step into uncharted territory. No one can give you the answer, not parents, not teachers, not partners. Only the stillness within can guide you through that haze. Questions about what truly matters have always been there. But when you're busy chasing life, you don't hear them. Only when you lose connection with the past, when the old no longer holds you, do these questions surface, not to panic you, but to lead you to a truer life. This process is always painful because it forces you to let go of the illusions that once helped you survive. But you must choose, either continue living in a broken frame or courageously build a new system of values, starting with absolute honesty with yourself. you'll find yourself drawn to simple yet inspiring things, deep conversations, a quiet sunset, and a piece of writing that touches emotions you've never named. Things with no market value, that don't make you richer or more famous, but make you feel alive. That's when you begin to understand that meaning doesn't come from having more, but from being truer. You start choosing again, one by one, what to give, what to receive, who to live with, and what to live for. Not because you should, but because you truly want to. And that is the deepest freedom, the freedom to live a life that's meaningful to you. If you're in this phase or have been through it, leave a message or a line to share, so you can be proud of yourself and others can see they're not alone. When you ask what truly matters, you're rewriting the definitions of success, love, and value in the language of your soul, not the world's formula. And then, after questions with no clear answers, after long nights wrestling with what's right and enough, you slowly realize that some things can't be solved by thinking. Some things don't need analysis, just feelings. Sign 2. You begin to touch the parts of yourself you once avoided. When old passions no longer hold you, when the familiar veil of life begins to tear, you don't just feel empty. You start to hear whispers from within, vague, disjointed, but strong enough to make you pause. This isn't boredom. It's a hidden door opening within your mind, a place where the buried parts of yourself begin to rise. In the depths of Carl Jung's psychology lies a place called the shadow. The shadow is the obscured half of your soul, the part you've unconsciously pushed to the edges of awareness because it didn't fit the image you or society deemed acceptable. It forms early. As a child, you once expressed everything freely. You raged when hurt, wailed when abandoned, imagined, and spoke to the world without restraint. But soon, you learned the conditions of love. Boys don't cry, girls don't argue, and so, bit by bit, you detached from yourself. The parts that weren't praised or loved, you buried them. The parts that shamed you, you shoved deep into the unconscious. But what's pushed into the darkness doesn't vanish. It doesn't dissolve into nothingness. It lingers, silently, persistently, waiting for its moment to return. Jung wrote, "The shadow is a moral problem that challenges the whole ego personality, for no one can become conscious of the shadow without considerable moral effort. The shadow is an inner moral dilemma, for to face it, you must confront your pretense with courage. The shadow isn't just negative traits like selfishness, envy, or anger. Sometimes it's buried potential, talents you dismissed as too wild, passions you abandoned for fear of failure, strengths you suppressed to avoid intimidating others. Jung called this the golden shadow, the beautiful parts of you that you didn't dare claim, so you projected them onto others and admired them from afar. Thus, the shadow doesn't only wound you, it's also the source of freedom if you're brave enough to face it. But before you can integrate it, you must see it. And that's what makes this process so difficult. You thought you weren't selfish until you felt jealous of someone's success. You thought you were forgiving until you snapped at a loved one for no reason. You thought you were carefree until you felt anxious when someone overlooked you. In those moments, the shadow reveals itself. And here begins the journey of integrating the shadow. Carl Jung called this the process of shadow integration. The shadow isn't something to destroy. It's everything you've hidden out of fear, judgment, or the desire to be loved. It's the memories you buried, the anger you suppressed, the dreams you mocked yourself for thinking were unrealistic. It's the versions of you, wild, fragile, sensitive, defiant, that you forced into silence to survive in this world. This process doesn't begin with awakening. It often starts with chaos. Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." It's a phase where you feel lost in your mind. One day, you're brimming with energy, ready to change everything. Next, you're exhausted, empty, and unable to leave your bed. Memories you'd forgotten surge back like undercurrents, fierce, sudden, and full of emotion. You overreact to trivial things and start to wonder, why does this hurt me so much? A woman who spent her life pleasing others, friends, family, and lovers, suddenly lashes out at a harmless request, not because the request was too much, but because within her is a rage, a resentment suppressed for 2 decades, for always having to understand others. Now, the shadow rises not to destroy her life, but to help her see herself more clearly. In Jungian psychology, the shadow is the denied part of the ego. It holds powerful energies that have been rejected. But those very energies, when acknowledged and integrated, become the source of transformation. You'll find it's where your creativity, intuition, passion, and deepest freedom reside. The change happens not when you heal the shadow, but when you stop fighting it. When you sit down, unlock the door to the room in your mind you've kept sealed, and listen to the old sadness, the regrets, the fear of abandonment, the questions never asked. You don't need to solve them right away. You just need to stay and listen, like a mother hearing her child wake from a nightmare. Unlike the quieter inner shifts before, shadow transformation often comes with heaviness, exhaustion, and even physical obstacles. Gatherings that drain you, conversations that leave you empty, and spaces that make you feel suffocated. But the moment you stop fighting it, you begin to see exactly what's strangling you. You start to recognize connections once glossed over by habit or duty. You see someone who always forces you to shrink to be loved. You notice an environment that constantly makes you doubt your worth. You realize that some conversations, though hours long, leave no trace of life. And one day, you just want to stand up and walk away. Not because you're selfish, but because your soul can no longer bear being tormented by what no longer feels true. Jung called this phase the dissolution of the shadow, when the ties bound to the shadow begin to crack. Imagine a forest. It's full of trees that have rotted but still stand, seeming like part of the ecosystem. Only when a great wind sweeps through do you see them uprooted, revealing their hollow cores. Transformation is like this. It sweeps away what stood not because of life, but because of familiarity. And though you may grieve, you also understand that they cannot join you in your new season of growth. Perhaps you were attached to a relationship for years, but every meeting required you to restrain yourself. Perhaps you lived in a harmonious community, but deep down, you knew you were never truly present. Like a river blocked by tangled roots, the flow continues but becomes stagnant, murky, and slow. And when the desire to live authentically grows, you know. It's time to clear the riverbed. You start learning to say no. No to control, no to dismissal, and no to roles that are too old. Jung didn't advocate cutting ties out of hurt. He said, Knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darkness of other people. And I'll warn you, separating from the shadow always comes with loss. But at the same time, you'll feel a profound relief, as if you've set down a stone you forgot you were carrying. Space begins to open. You breathe easier. You rediscover nourishing conversations. Silence stops being frightening and becomes a place of restoration. Your days stop being swept along by schedules and start finding their rhythm. Your rhythm. And then something miraculous happens. New people, places, and opportunities begin to find you. Not because you sought them, but because the frequency you're emitting has changed. You no longer need masks to be accepted. You no longer hide your deepest desires. You start living more clearly, more truthfully. And in that clarity, you attract connections on the same frequency, where you don't need to defend or perform, where you can be yourself without asking permission. Not everyone will understand. Some will accuse you of changing, being distant, or not the same. But you know, you're not distant. You're warming up to yourself. You're not callous. You're learning to give love where it belongs. Carl Jung believed, a man who has not passed through the inferno of his passions has never overcome them. Stepping away from what's toxic isn't running away, it's walking through yourself. And now, you no longer need to endure to be loved, to stay silent, to be kept. You choose yourself. And that is one of the most powerful acts of awakening. This is the essence of the awakening Jung always emphasized. It doesn't begin with light. It begins with daring to look into the darkness without turning away. Sign 3. Life begins to speak to you through symbols. As you begin to shed old layers and courageously step into the doorway of darkness, where the forgotten parts of yourself wait to be embraced, something strange starts to happen. It's no longer just movements within your mind. The outer world begins to change its language, and if you're attentive enough and quiet enough to listen, you'll realize that life is speaking to you, not through words, but through symbols. You glance at the clock and see 11:11, repeating so often it no longer feels random. You turn on the radio, and the lyrics playing are exactly what your heart needs to hear at that moment. You dream of an owl flying over a field, and the next morning, you see that image in a book you stumbled upon. A stranger in a cafe says something offhand, yet it stops you in your tracks, as if your soul has just been called by name. Jung called these phenomena synchronicity, meaningful coincidences. They don't arise from logic, they have no clear cause. But they carry a profound sense that something greater is at work, guiding and responding to the shifts within you. In Jungian psychology, when you embark on the process of integration, facing the shadow, releasing the ego, and embracing the fragmented parts of yourself, the divide between your inner and outer worlds begins to dissolve. Jung believed that the unconscious isn't just inside you. It's also a gateway connecting you to the entire universe, to what he called the collective unconscious. And when true inner transformation occurs, the outer world mirrors it. Not in a cause and effect way, but through symbols, as if reality itself is a living reflection of your soul. In other words, something happens in the outer world, and you feel it perfectly aligns with what's happening inside you. Not because it leads to something, but because it reflects something. In those moments, the unconscious doesn't just live in dreams or emotions. It seeps into reality, creating connections that are illogical yet deeply meaningful, as if the universe is weaving messages from a frequency you can't see but can feel. In terms of symbolism, synchronicity is the moment you step into a different dimension of reality, where everything carries meaning and significance transcends cause. A blackbird appears just as you think of a relationship that has died. A word you've never heard suddenly shows up repeatedly in books, conversations, and dreams. An old friend calls the moment you're thinking of them after years of no contact. These aren't miracles, but manifestations of the alignment between your unconscious and the symbolic order of the world. Jung called this the acausal connecting principle, a principle of connection beyond cause and effect. The key is that the meaning lies in your response. You feel it's true, not through reason, but through a deep, hazy intuition. It's the sense of something just happened to me, unexplainable, yet perfectly right. Synchronicity is how the soul communicates when ordinary language isn't enough. In modern society, we live mostly in the realm of reason. But the soul doesn't speak in charts, it speaks in images, emotions, and symbols. And synchronicity is the soul's letter sent through the material world. As you begin the process of individuation, you become more sensitive to these messages. Not because you're more spiritual than others, but because you're living closer to your inner truth. And when your inner truth shifts, reality cannot help but respond. Jung emphasized that synchronicity often occurs around major archetypes: death, rebirth, the mother, the teacher, darkness, and light. When you touch an archetype through crisis, dreams, loss, or revelation, the universe responds with corresponding symbols. For example, when you're experiencing the death of the ego, you might repeatedly encounter images of death, darkness, or decay, not just in dreams, but in everyday life. A movie you happen to watch, a story someone tells, a picture on a wall. This is the archetype at work in the depths of the unconscious, its symbols spilling into reality, creating a web of synchronicity-like signposts guiding your way. You might call it a coincidence, but you also know it's more than that, because it awakens something in you that no words can precisely describe. Jung wrote in Man and His Symbols, "Man is not complete when he lives in a world of things alone. He must realize that he lives in a symbolic world. To truly live is to live in symbols, to see the world not just with your eyes, but with your consciousness. To understand that not everything can be analyzed, but everything can be felt when you learn to live from your depths." A woman who lost her mother kept dreaming of white butterflies. At first, she thought they were just a product of her grief. But then, butterflies began appearing in reality on her mother's memorial day, landing on her window or near the altar. Each time, she felt as if her mother was returning, staying by her side. It was a sense of something sacred accompanying her loss. That is synchronicity. And you? At this point, do you realize you've encountered a symbol like this too? If so, write it down in the comments below as a response to yourself. In those shared fragments, your awakening finds its path. But to live in the world of symbols, you must let go of the obsession to understand immediately. Your mind will urge you to dismiss it all. It's just a coincidence. But your soul won't. The soul knows every sign carries meaning if you dare to trust it. So, if your life has recently started to feel strange in a profound way, If you sense something is trying to speak to you without clear words, pause. Observe with your heart. Write down the symbols you encounter. Draw your dreams. Note the numbers, images, and intuitions. They are the code of your soul. Because when synchronicity intensifies, it's a sign you're approaching a profound threshold of transformation. As Jung said, it's when the self, the symbol of inner wholeness, begins to actively participate in your life. Everything starts to shimmer strangely, as if the veil between you and a deeper reality is slowly dissolving. Sign 4. You feel both fear and excitement at the same time, and then, as an inevitable consequence, you draw closer to a threshold where your soul no longer waits, where you are compelled to step into something yet to be named. This is when you experience a paradoxical yet profoundly raw emotion, fear intertwined with excitement. It's like standing on the edge of a cliff. Below lies the abyss of the unknown. Ahead stretches the sky of possibility. You know you can't turn back. The old self has crumbled away. But you're also unsure if you're strong enough to soar. Your heart pounds, not out of danger, but because you are alive, in a way that is honest, raw, and impossible to feign. Carl Jung once wrote, "We cannot change anything unless we accept it. Everything true requires transformation. And true transformation doesn't begin with happiness, it begins with upheaval." This is the phase where the ego realizes it's no longer in control. It's afraid because what's coming doesn't fit its plans. Yet at the same time, your soul, the deeper, vaster part of you, is opening, like a long-locked door now flung wide to the light. Jung called this the moment of the deepest inner transformation, where two opposing forces, the instinct to cling to the old and the yearning to birth something new, collide, creating a unique energy, excitement laced with fear. You might feel like you're on the verge of losing everything: stability, identity, roles, and a sense of familiarity. But simultaneously, something within you is eager, as if you're returning to yourself after a long journey of living by someone else's script. Imagine an ancient ship anchored too long in a calm bay. Its hull is covered in moss, its ropes worn, but the water around it remains still, familiar, and safe. Day after day, the ship gazes toward the horizon, where the ocean beckons, where winds carry whispers of something greater. Yet each time a wave gently rocks its side, it recoils, clinging to its rusty anchor, as if it's the last thing keeping it from vanishing. Then, on a nameless morning, the sea changes color and a storm brews. An invisible pressure beneath the waves makes it impossible for the ship to stay still. The wood creaks. The ropes begin to snap, one by one. Not because they're being pulled, but because the ship itself is breaking apart from within. It can no longer bear the confinement. The old structure no longer fits the oceanic life rising within it. And in that moment, caught between the fear of drifting into the unknown and an irrepressible urge from within, the ship lets itself go into the vast sea. People often assume that being on the right path feels light, peaceful, and safe. But Jung emphasized that rebirth always comes with symbolic death. Before you become your truest self, you must witness the collapse of everything that no longer fits. No light is born without a breaking. No beginning arrives without passing through the end. You might feel like you're living between two worlds. Part of you still clings to the familiar, your job, relationships, and old expectations. But another part is stirring, wanting to write, to leave, to be silent, to cry, to live from a deeper place. And between these two parts lies an inner tremor that throws you into a state of polarity, waking in the morning with hope and going to bed at night with unease. Carl Jung called this the confrontation with individuation, where you must break free from the cocoon of the ego to become something greater, deeper. Like a seed in the soil, you cannot plan the moment of sprouting. It doesn't come because you're ready. It comes because you can no longer stay still in the dark. You start to feel restless with what was once stable. Not because the world has changed, but because you've outgrown the old space. Like a river in flood, you can no longer flow obediently between narrow banks. You need to break the shores. You need to carve new paths. You need freedom to become yourself, even if it means shattering every old structure. A new energy begins to form within you. Not fierce like anger, not vibrant like joy, but smoldering, compressed, like the earth trembling before a seed breaks through the surface. You can no longer work the same way, talk the same way, live the same old life. It's not that you're ungrateful for the past, but the past can no longer contain the version of you that's rising. Jung asserted, "What you resist not only persists, but will grow in size." You can resist this need to grow for a while. You can dismiss the feeling of, "I need to change. I'm overflowing in this old life, and I want to live differently." But the more you resist, the larger it grows. That's the nature of individuation. It doesn't ask for your permission. It forces you to evolve. And if you don't move, you'll be trapped in stagnation and frustration. You feel it clearly. Growth is no longer a choice. It's a vital need. Like a tree reaching for light. Like an eagle leaving the nest to learn to fly. Like a fire that must burn to avoid consuming itself from within. You start learning anew. Listening, questioning, creating, daring. Not for fame, money, or status, but because you know you can't live dishonestly with yourself for another day. You might be confused, afraid, unsure of who you'll become. But you know one thing for certain: if you don't change, you'll wither. And so, little by little, you begin breaking patterns, dismantling old rhythms, throwing yourself into new experiences, even without guarantees. Like spring arriving without needing permission, inner growth doesn't wait for you to be ready. It comes, sweeping you along like a seasonal wind, and you have only two choices: resist and stay stuck, or surrender to it and become something greater than yourself. When you enter this phase, you no longer fear starting over. You fear living halfway. You no longer need safety, you need meaning. And you begin doing everything to get closer to it, learning, seeking, creating, questioning, and daring to act. Every book you choose, every new person you speak to, and every decision you make stems from a deep inner drive to grow so you can live authentically. I vividly recall a message we received in our channel's inbox. A woman of a certain age, who had followed our Jung-inspired content from the early days, shared her story. For years she worked as a matchmaker. People called her an expert, crediting her with bringing countless couples together. But few knew she felt trapped in that work. She helped others find love, telling them about true love, yet she didn't believe in it herself and never felt worthy of being loved. One evening, after watching a video about the shadow on our channel, she had a dream. In it, she was a little girl in a white dress, running through a misty forest, endlessly searching for her mother and crying. The dream recurred often, and each time she woke, her heart raced, her throat tight. That day, for the first time in years, she took leave and went home to see her mother. It turned out her mother, unable to support her financially, had left her with her grandmother as a child. A childhood lacking the love of both parents had made her lose faith in love. Even now, she harbored resentment toward her mother for leaving her. But despite her fear, something rising within her gave her the courage to face her mother. She wrote, "I was afraid. Afraid that if I kept avoiding it, I'd lose my chance to see her again. I'm so glad I did it. I feel so much lighter now." This blend of excitement and fear is a biological response of the soul. It tells you you're nearing a turning point where you're no longer who you were, but not yet fully who you'll become. That moment isn't clear, it trembles, it's conflicted. But it's so real it cannot be ignored. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." The greatest gift of life isn't success, fame, or being loved. It's becoming yourself. But to reach that gift, you must dare to cross dark territories no map can guide. You must learn to trust the smallest signs, heed the wordless calls, and move by intuition rather than reason. This journey has no clear destination. Each time you think you've figured it out, reality opens a new, deeper layer. But if you're brave enough to keep digging, every step becomes a ritual, every decision an expression of the soul, and every day, whether quiet or intense, carries a whisper. Keep going. What you're seeking is also seeking you. So if you feel caught in a whirlwind, disoriented, uninspired, torn yet full of longing, don't give up. Stay, listen, and keep walking. I sincerely thank you for joining me on this journey of awakening. If what I've shared helps you see a faint light on a path you thought was dark, please subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications today. You never know when the next video might arrive exactly when you need it most.